What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if we're going to be able to help the villain in Hogwarts Legacy, or really what we're going to be able to do with the villain in general. So, if you guys missed out on this, about a week and a half ago, I made a video on a whole load of Warner Bros. Leaks, and I think, I mean, it was a very popular video, which I greatly appreciate anybody who watched it. And it had, Hogwarts Legacy, it had Gotham Knights, it had Suicide Squad, Killer Justice League, it had all this stuff, and one of the things it said for Hogwarts Legacy is that we'd be able to help the villain. So if we choose to be bad, we'd basically be on the villain's side. So I read that. I kind of reacted to it a little bit in that video, but that was more of a broad thing talking about all the games, all the leaks that were in that, in that listing. For this, I want to specifically talk about that one piece. Will we be able to help the villain? Maybe do we kill the villain and do we replace them, right, if we're like good or bad? So I want to talk about that in this video. As always, if you guys are not already, make sure you guys are subscribed. We're pushing for 50K very, very hard. Most people that watch my videos are not actually subscribed to the channel, believe it or not. So make sure if you guys have not done it already, you guys are subscribed. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when all these videos go up. And a very easy thing to do to help the YouTube algorithm push my videos is just like the video. Liking the video, disliking the video also helps. So if you hate me, go ahead and leave that dislike. Leaving comments, obviously, too, but likes are very, very easy. Hit the like button. Definitely helps the video. All right, so, we've talked about being good, being bad. We've talked about, if we could, I've already said the word, but I want to kind of, not say it as much as possible. If we can eliminate people, let's say, depending on what happens, right? Can we do some forbidden spells? Can we do, Avada Kedavra, stuff like that? So, in the leak, it talks about how we could, potentially work with the villain. What's interesting is we've never really talked about it because I like talking about these theories, these far-reaching things. For some reason, I'm able to do it a lot better for Hogwarts. Like, the stuff we've covered, okay, I can't do this for a lot of games and movies, okay? There are some. I think the things that maybe the most in this world passionate about, I could probably come up with topics, but for the most part, I'm really bad at coming up with my own ideas. And maybe in a way that's kind of hypocritical because I like to, obviously for the channel even, I point out flaws and weaknesses and stuff like that, but I don't always have ways of doing it better, which is a negative of me, and I need to work on that, and I think I have, but it's definitely something, I guess to say out loud just to be kind of honest with you guys, right? The thing we haven't really talked about with Hogwarts Legacy is the story, and that's just flat out because I really don't know what the heck's going on. There's really, even in the time period that it's set, there's events that are happening in the wizarding world, but there's really the story that they're going to tell can be very, isolated. It can be very much on its own. These villains don't ever have to appear again. They don't have to have some ties to, they can, and maybe they will, but they don't have to have a tie to villains that come after them, right? Like, this is going to be, depending on the year, it could be 30, 40 years before, like, a Grindelwald thing, right? It could be actually when he's growing up. Like, we don't know. So it could connect to villains that we are very aware of, but it doesn't have to. So it could be very much on its own. So I don't know too much about what the story could be. Obviously, there's been leaks and people talking, and which, again, you either believe or you don't, but maybe that, Fantastic Beasts actually do play a pretty big role in this game, and maybe it actually has, a central plot point to what the villain is doing. Again, we've seen the villain a couple times, or, the villains, I guess, right, with those masks, but we don't know all that much about them. So I can't say too much just because I'm kind of in the dark, and I'm not creative enough to come up with something kind of on my own. But what I will say, I can talk to the idea of, joining him and stuff like that. That's a choice I think that it's kind of stupid to say that they're going to have to make. Obviously, they've made it, right? But in a game like this, or really in any of these open world, choose your own adventure kind of games where you can be good or bad, I feel like there's definitely an option to either work with either work with the villain or take out the villain and kind of replace them as a better villain, or both, right? You could work with them, right, kind of gain their thing, and then if you get, say, the super bad ending, quote unquote bad, which is bad in terms of you're a bad person, not bad and oh, this is the worst possible outcome, although you could look at it that way. Maybe you take out the villain and you become the head of this group, or you become, if you're looking for an item, you possess the item and you do bad things with it. Again, the goal, well, what we do know is that, obviously Hogwarts Legacy, right? And that your choices are going to define the legacy of Hogwarts. So even taking that, you could argue that there is going to be some connection between what happens in this game to what happens in the Fantastic Beasts era to what happens in the Harry Potter era. You could argue that they're all going to be very much connected. And I guess if the game wants to stick with the title, like, and wants to really, bond with that Hogwarts Legacy, then yeah, it does need to have some sort of effect that lasts all the way through that we know of the Wizarding world. But again, you can't do things that impede on what we already know. So it's not like you can kill Grindelwald, or it's not like you're going to become the next one, because then what happens to you, right? So like, and that's an interesting thing too that you have to think about, because whatever the ending, and we've talked about the ending, the potential ending of this game before, like whatever the ending may be, if you're really good or if you're really bad, the hard thing is like you don't really appear afterwards. So like, it can be big, I guess, in the context of the game, and but that's kind of it, because then if you go further than that, then you'd be stepping on what's already established. Like if you're a dark wizard, like a super, and which we know you are super powerful. If you are a super powerful dark wizard by the end of this game, like, is there like an epilogue? Is there like an after credits scene? Is there a Hogwarts Legacy 2 to make sure that you don't make it all the way? Because then, like, well, Grindelwald during his time, he was the most feared, he was the most powerful, right? And only really ever beaten by, in terms of power level, by Voldemort. I mean, obviously Dumbledore, in terms of good versus bad, but in terms of like being bad, right? Or I guess like what we think of as bad, because obviously he thinks he's good, is Grindelwald. So like if you're out there as well during that era, well, that doesn't make much sense, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, you can do it. It's very easy to do. You could just literally end the game where you are in that, path, and then you just kind of ignore it. You know what I mean? It's like there, but it's not really there when you're watching Fantastic Beasts, and you're like, yeah, my character is out there. I mean, like, you can say that. It's kind of dumb, because it's like they don't, it's tough, because they put themselves into a corner and you do that no matter what if you're working in an established property like this, right? You have to follow rules. You have to follow time periods. You can't step on things that have already been done unless you're retelling the game or the movies or the books in the game, which, I mean, obviously has been done. They did it for pretty much every single movie, right? And you can do that, but you have to follow those rules. So, like, it's a tough situation that they're in. I feel like working with the villain definitely makes sense. Again, I also feel like it makes sense to work with him and then potentially, take him out, take him in the back alley and then maybe leave him there in a different state than you brought him in. I think that's something that could very much happen. And I think that makes sense if you go full on bad. But again, it'll be interesting to see how bad you can actually be, right? You look at games like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, I mean, there are significant differences if you go bad. Now, the thing is, though, some games do it more than others, where when you're bad, you can see it throughout the game, right? And you can see how people interact with you, but then it still comes down to a choice at the end where maybe you could still make the good choice. So that's going to be an interesting thing for me, is that does this game, and we can talk about this in a different video, will it lock you out? I actually like the idea of it potentially, if you go, and some games do this, if you're so bad, does it lock you out sometimes of doing good? And I think Mass Effect does this too, right? If you're too far one or the other, the worst dialogue option on the other side. So if you're like massively good, the most bad option for dialogue that you can do, you don't actually have, like, whatever you want to call it, like the charisma. You don't have like the skills to actually say those words, right? I believe Mass Effect has that. And it's the same thing the other way. If you're so bad, you don't say the best thing you can say, because that's not really in your character anymore. And I mean, you chose to do that, right? So that's going to be an interesting thing too. And that's going a little off topic, but I think that still does apply to the ending, or to, with this villain. What are you going to be able to do with the villain? Do you take him out kind of early? Is it something where he's around the entire time, and at the very end you can again work with him? You're like a disciple of his, or like an apprentice, or do you maybe just take him out altogether? So we'll have to see how it goes. Again, I mean, every time I talk about this kind of stuff, it gets me very, very excited. And this is something, when I talk about a lot of these things, there'll always be people that say it'll never happen, like, and they'll say, like, I'm one of the people that are getting people all excited. I mean, I always tell you guys, never expect almost any of the stuff we talk about to actually make it into the game. I'd never expect it. It could, and I want it to, but that doesn't mean I'm expecting it to. But something like this, I mean, yeah, in a game where you can be good or bad, and there's a villain, you would imagine that you either take out the villain and become the villain, or that you work with the villain. I mean, that's kind of, you can do other things, I guess, but those are two very obvious choices that the game could put you through. So let me know, guys, in the comments below, what do you think? What do you think happens at the end of the game? Do you think you can, again, the options with the villain, join them, take them out? Let me know. Again, as always, make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on. If you guys did like this video, make sure you guys give it a like. Definitely helps the YouTube algorithm, or give it a dislike. That's totally cool. New Hogwarts Legacy videos coming to you guys every 5 or so days. In May, we will start talking about E3, if they do anything for E3, what we could see, all that stuff. And then obviously if anything ever comes out for Hogwarts Legacy, I'll be sure to cover it immediately, okay? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.